Yep.
Our guest to summit Mount Everest, and he did it with only one lung. He'll share his incredible story with us in just a couple of minutes.
But before we get into that, a question I hear a lot is, sometimes I get so stressed I can't sleep at night. What can I do?
You know, this happens a lot when people feel like they're up against a situation you can't control. It's something you're going to worry about and you're going to lie awake about. I mean, so many different things you can do. One thing is really start making a list of something that you that you either can do right then or you can do the first thing tomorrow morning when you get up. I mean, if you get that sense of control, that tends to put you at ease, at least for me.
So one thing that you can do tomorrow morning?
Yeah, at least something about that situation.
And putting it down on paper helps.
Putting it on paper helps. And if you don't feel like you can control anything, people of faith feel like they can, you know, have a higher power helping them out, things like this. You can do too. I mean, there's journaling, there's progressive muscle relaxation, starting with your toes and stuff like that.
You tighten and then release, tighten and release.
Feels pretty
and
good.
work up the body, right?
Yeah, I don't really have the patience for that, but you know, kind of stresses
well,
me out.
I think some people do, and I think it can be helpful for some of them. I think the other thing that some people have done is to imagine a peaceful place in their mind where they go there and just imagine the sights, the sounds, the smells, and try to relax
that really
in that situation.
Helps. Favorite place? But counting backwards for me, because my mind races a million miles an hour, counting backwards like from 24 slowly sometimes helps me go to sleep.
I think that including exercise in your day makes such a big difference for stress. And being able to get those endorphins going and get positive hormones you get from exercising can really make a big difference. Not that you have to do it right when you're going to bed, but at some point during the day.
I like listening to soothing music. Feel good. You can kind of take your mind off of that.
Well, I'm going to go back to the exercise comment because our guest today knows something about exercise.
That is true.
That's right. 7 summits, the Explorer's Grand Slam. Our guest today has conquered all that and more on this edition of Lifestyle Magazine.
This is Lifestyle Magazine. Long, Obi DK, Lionel LaMountain, and Mike Tucker.
How you doing?
Welcome.
Thanks.
He's beaten cancer twice, was given 14 days to live, and was in a medically induced coma for 1 year. Yet after all of that, Sean Swarner has literally stood of Mount Everest. Sean, welcome. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me here.
Tell us how it first started.
You know, it started when I was 13 years old, and I was going up for a basketball layup, came down, something snapped to my knee. Knee injury pretty much triggered every joint in my body to go so haywire that every joint swelled up. And I know that there's a medical term for it. I can't think it off the top of my head. But my own mom and dad couldn't even recognize their son.
Wow.
You know, I slept through my alarm clock, and initially they thought I had pneumonia. So they started treating me for pneumonia and to cure cancer. My general practitioner from Willard, Ohio, coming into the hospital room and asking mom and dad to step outside the hall, you know, because they wanted to keep it private. And being a nosy teenager, 13 years old, what's going on? They're talking about me. So I walked over there, and I remember hearing the doctor ask my parents, do either of you know of any oncologists? And at the time, I didn't know what oncologist meant. I didn't know what cancer meant. I didn't know. I just knew that I was sick. And eventually, I was diagnosed in Columbus, Ohio, at a bigger hospital where they took, I can't even tell you how many vials of blood. Eventually, as a 13-year-old 8th grader, I was diagnosed with advanced stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they literally gave me 3 months to live.
So you went from being an athlete, basically, as a 13-year-old, to all of a sudden having this devastating illness. What was that like?
I mean, it was awful. I was a competitive swimmer. I ran track. I played football, basketball, you name it. I had a great time doing it. And then all of a sudden, boom, my life was on hold. You know, you can't get, and I was so active, and all of a sudden, my life was just on pause.
And you were tied to a hospital room.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was 60 pounds overweight from the medicine, bald from head to toe. And girls collecting baseball cards, having a great time with their lives. You know, here I am fighting for my life. And I remember head to toe, sitting on the bottom of the shower floor, pulling chunks of hair out of the drain, crying my eyeballs out.
Obviously, it was very traumatic. How scared were you? I mean, you're 13 years old.
It was, you know, initially, being that young, I don't think I understood the full ramification. Telling my friends, he's sick, he's sick. And because I was so overweight, because I was so, in my eyes, disfigured, you know, I just kept fighting for my life. And I saw basically that I had 2 options. I could either fight for my life or give up and die.
So you realized 13?
I think so. Yeah, but I didn't really fully comprehend what death meant. You know, I just knew that I might die, and that was just a concept, it was just an idea.
And you?
I wasn't. I mean, in my mind, I actually, I'm a big believer in the mind-body connection. And as a member, I'm 13, I remember picture myself doing a lot of visualization. Picture myself in the IV bag, in the chemotherapy, in the drip, coming down in the white little clear tube. And I remember flying my little spaceship, basically, like this topic spaceship. And I remember looking at my body over here on the left, the TV up straight ahead, the window over here, and all of a sudden I was thrust into the body, and now I'm surrounded, and all the little tiny spaceships kind of gathered together in the heart. And then we were thrust out, and I followed my little GPS dash, the cancer cell that I was in charge of destroying. And I'd find it, and I'd unload the missiles and everything, and the missiles were actually loaded with chemotherapy and the medicine.
That's really interesting. Was there a moment when you felt like there was hope and like things were going to be okay?
Yeah, there was, and I remember, I was always treated on, we'll say, the 7th floor. I don't remember exactly what floor it was, but all the beds were full, and they stuck me on a different floor, a lower floor, and my mom and dad kept trying to get me back up to that floor because it was familiar to me, and I had the nurses, the doctors, you know, that whole floor, we were like family. They all pushed me through it, and it was devastating not being able to have that familiarity of everything.
Yeah.
And my mom and dad kept pushing and pushing to get me that. I was in the hospital getting my treatment, and when the instant they put me in that room, I actually remember looking out the window into the courtyard, and there was a rainbow coming in.
Wow.
And I looked at my mom, and like in tears, I was like, it's going to be all right, isn't it?
Wow. We're going to take a little bit of a break. We are going to hear more of Sean Swarner's amazing journey.
Go ahead, get an apple. We'll be right back.
Author, adventurer, and cancer survivor, Sean Swarner is sharing how he conquered cancer, but then was dealt a crushing blow. Tell us about that crushing blow.
Putting it mildly, a second cancer. You know, I was going in for a checkup for the first cancer. Thankfully, I was in remission in one day, right lung, about the size of a golf ball. They did a needle biopsy. They took out a lymph node. They put in a Hickman catheter, took out the tumor, put in a drainage tube, and started chemotherapy in less
All
than
in
one day.
And how old were you now?
I was almost just about 16 years old, so maybe one more month, or 3 months before I was 16.
And you'd probably just been at the point where you're starting to feel like you were getting back to a normal life.
Yeah, if there is a normal
we're
for being a teenager.
But yeah. Years.
Second blow, what are you thinking? Like, why is this happening to me?
Exactly. You know, at first I was thinking, why me? Why me? You know, I went through the first one. I didn't want to go through the second one. You know, I knew what it was like going through that first one. I knew my life was going to be on pause. I knew I was going to lose my hair. I knew I was going to lose my friends. I kept asking myself over and over again, why me? Why me? Why me? But realized that having that why me question didn't change the facts. The facts were I had cancer again. I need to do something about it.
Tell us about the chemotherapy treatments, because obviously they were, very severe.
The second time around, the chemo treatments were a lot. In fact, my cycle was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in the hospital, so inpatient. And then I'd be released to have my hemoglobin and red blood cell count get higher so I could handle essentially another onslaught of this chemical cocktail.
And it was every week?
And then, exactly, yeah. Then I'd go back in Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and that would be one cycle. And the treatments were so harsh because no one's ever had these two cancers before. The doctors didn't know what to do, so every time I was in the hospital, I was actually in medically induced coma. I don't even remember being 16 years old.
And you were undergoing these treatments for a year?
For about a year, yeah. So 3 months of intense chemo, a month of radiation. I only have one lung now, and then 10 more months of chemotherapy.
So you went through very difficult treatment. What happened?
Well, 14 days turned 3 months, and thanks to the miracle of modern medicine, family support, prayer, and just an inner will to get up out of the hospital, I walked out of the hospital back into remission in a quote-unquote normal teenage life.
And all of that probably really strengthened your determination.
It definitely did. It encouraged me to understand that there's nothing I can do about yesterday. And there's tomorrow's today. And actually every day I wake up, I tell myself, no matter what, today's the best day ever.
You beat cancer twice. Now, what motivated you to be an activist now and a motivator for this deadly disease?
Well, long story short, I went to college, turned into Belushi from Animal House in college, had a great time, relived my high school years.
Good.
And then wanted to be a psychologist for cancer patients, but because of my own baggage, I couldn't help unless I helped research, and I figured, okay, well, you know, life is too precious and too short, and I wanted to essentially give people hope, you know, that the human body can live without food. The human condition can sustain itself for about 3 days without water, but no human alive can live for more than 30 seconds without hope, because without hope, we have nothing. And I wanted to use Everest as a 29,000-foot platform to scream hope.
So, all of a sudden one day you just decided you were going to climb Everest.
Yeah. I mean, it was a little more in depth than that, but I wanted something bigger and something bigger and something that no cancer survivor had ever done before. And after doing some research, my brother and I found that no cancer survivor had climbed Everest. And
you only have one lung.
One fully functioning big bulldog lung, apparently.
So what did your doctors tell you?
Probably the same. Mom and Dad literally looked at me and said, "We didn't get you through 2 cancers to go kill yourself on a hunk of rock and ice." On a hunk of rock and ice.
So when they made that statement to you?
You know, I think I told my parents, look, I understand that no life is worth a hunk of rock and ice. No life is worth dying for on the mountain to get to the top. You know, I would take calculated risks. I would always keep in mind the reason I'm there, why I'm there, which is to give hope to other people.
What do you, when you're on top of that mountain, tell us what you're doing on top of that mountain. What's so you knew?
Yeah, actually, it's my why. It's that had names of people touched by cancer on it, and at the bottom it said, "Dedicated to all those affected by cancer in this small world, keep climbing." And I left that at the top of cancer patients worldwide.
So I just want to go back a second, because I want to hear about how you trained to go to Everest.
Training was really difficult, and I didn't know how. I mean, most people train for years to climb Everest. I literally moved from Jacksonville, Florida, to climb Mount Everest. I do not suggest that. But there's a mountain out there called Long's Peak in Colorado. And it's literally 18 miles round trip, goes up to 14,256 feet, and I climb that mountain once a week with 100 pounds of rocks in my backpack.
Wow. And that is a difficult climb.
And it definitely is, and it might explain why I had to have knee surgery.
How many times a week do you train, would you say?
Now that I'm back, probably train 5 or 6 times a week.
Wow. We're going to continue this story. We'll be back in a minute.
Be right back.
We and Lionel have joined us, and we are here to talk about Sean's incredible journey.
Absolutely. Sean, I'm intrigued by your story. I mean, you beat cancer twice, you've lost a lung, you've made a decision to climb Everest, something your parents don't want you to do. By the way, I'm old enough to be your dad. I wouldn't want you to do this either. I'm talking you out of it after the fact. So what did you start to do then? I mean, what's the process now?
You know, I think it's different for everyone, but for me, I read on the mountain. I got a book that was about this thick, and I guarantee if you tell me, you know, you read one line out of that book, I can tell you exactly what paragraph, what page, everything.
So you've gone over this.
And I was out doing something every single day for 8 months, be it climbing mountains in Colorado with 100 pounds of rocks in my backpack, or out running, or rocks in my backpack that weighed about 200 pounds to just go up and down the stairs.
Wow.
So that was your whole focus?
Was just getting my body in shape, yeah.
You made a decision, and every behavior then is going to focus on that decision.
Yeah, I kind of put the blinders on, knew I had a goal, and I knew I was going to make it. I didn't want anything to distract me. I had laser vision.
Yeah.
Sean, I have a couple questions for you. So you conquered cancer, you conquered Everest. So the first question is, which one was it? Were there any similarities in the process of conquering cancer that you learned in conquering Everest? I don't know.
Yes, no, yes. Yes, no, yes, yes. There are a lot of similarities, and I think a lot of them are right here. Okay. You know, so many times people give up here before their body should. And they don't push themselves hard enough because they're afraid. They're so focused on what they're going to lose as opposed to what they could potentially gain.
Wow.
And a lot of it for myself was vision. Differences are, Everest took me a month and a half. Cancer took 3 years out of my life.
Wow.
Okay, were you ever tempted to quit during the cancer battle? And then were you ever tempted to quit on the Everest ascension?
If if I said no, I'd be a liar. I mean, like everybody in the world, and you could even go throughout the day. You know, you could have something happen to you, and you go from this elated state to being depressed, and all of a sudden you're thinking to yourself, "Oh, this is awful." You know, going to the North Pole. I was actually trekking along and thinking to myself, "This is awesome. This is fantastic. This is beautiful. What am I doing here? It's so cold." I have to, for myself, I focus on the end, and I see myself there, and I put emotions onto. I start living as though my goal in the future is now in the present.
Do you think that you beating cancer twice gave you the courage to conquer Everest?
I think going through cancer taught me what true pain is.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
You know, and what true. I'm doing it for other people touched by cancer. I always think to myself, I can continue pushing forward through these elements, through the wind, through the cold.
You had a cause.
Exactly. I can always pick up the satellite phone and say, you know, get me out of here, evacuate me. People battling for their lives don't have that option.
No, they don't. But you know, your whole process about I have not had to fight cancer. I'm not going to Everest, and I'm not going to the North Pole either way. But there are challenges in my life as well that I think I learned something from you about. The end goal and just visualizing myself having accomplished that. Is that a part of your message to people?
I think it is, because so many people start goals and they don't have a true belief in themselves, knowing that they can make it.
Yeah.
And
so they never get committed because of that.
Exactly. And if you're not fully committed, you're not going to accomplish that goal. For myself, or anyone, if you put an emotional attachment